There are some players that are performing at red hot levels right now, and there's a decent chance they're on your fantasy team. And you just might be able to trade that player away from your team and get an upgraded piece back in return. So in this video, we're going to talk about 5 potential players that you could be trading away right now on your teams. And again, the point of this in most cases is to sell high where we can. I'm going to start with J.K. Dobbins, which I get it. This dude is rushing for 133 rushing yards per game right now. That means he literally leads the NFL currently, according to StatMuse, with 266 rushing yards. And by the way, look at the rushing leaders. J.K. Dobbins, Jordan Mason, and Josh Jacobs, maybe you could have seen coming. These are the 3 rushing leaders. You even scroll down. Ramondre Stevenson is in there as a top 5 rushing leader. These are the guys who are currently through 2 weeks, a small sample, but nobody probably would have guessed that outside of maybe Jacobs and Saquon Barkley here. But it doesn't just stop with the overall production, because Dobbins has also been efficient. He currently ranks number 1 in EPA, expected points added. That's an efficiency metric per carry, and he ranks top 10 in success rate. Look, he's been great. That's basically all I can tell you. I'm not going to sit here and just argue that he hasn't been good or say something otherwise. Like, there is one issue that maybe you can point to. Okay, right now he's not seeing the cheat code targets, and if you ask me, well, where are the cheat code usage? I said targets, but the usage right now, it means for running backs in fantasy, red zone touches and targets. I've seen this knock against Dobbins right now. But I would even counter and say that that's not a fair one. Yeah, he has 2 red zone touches through 2 games because he's scoring touchdowns from 40 plus yards out. That's probably why. He only has 4 targets so far. Yeah, because they were winning their pass game by 20 points and just got to run the ball 44 times. Like, yes, I want Dobbins to see targets and red zone touches. I want all my fantasy running backs to see this. It would elevates them to being a consistent fantasy starter. But for 2 weeks, I don't think that's the reason you should put the knock against them. I saw somebody put out on Twitter that I don't think it really holds up. But what I do think holds up a little bit is you can say that he's splitting the backfield with Gus Edwards, because he is. Look at the snaps here. 53% of the snaps to J.K. Dobbins, 45% to Gus Edwards. Gus Edwards actually leading the backfield with 41% of the rush attempts compared to J.K. Dobbins with 39%. But again, here's the deal. When J.K. Dobbins is running for 40 plus yard plays and 40 plus yard touchdowns, and yeah, his drives are going to be shorter, which limits his snaps because then Gus Edwards takes on the next drive. And Gus Edwards just hasn't been good. He has not been good at all. I think that he's at risk of losing his job, maybe to Kamani Vidal, who's on this roster. You see Hassan Haskins, who the team ended up adding. He's played in a game, seen a couple of snaps, former Michigan player that Jim Harbaugh knows. So this is not really a situation where I'm worried about Gus Edwards. Look, it really just comes down to that J.K. Dobbins is a red hot asset on your team. Like, I don't think that he's going to end up leading the season in rushing yards. I don't think he's going to be the running back 1 overall. I think he maybe can finish in the top 10 in fantasy, probably the top 15 if he stays healthy, but why not try to upgrade him right now for a player who is a better asset and we know for sure will probably push towards the top 10 at his position? And right now is probably your final time to do that, because the Chargers are going on the road against a Pittsburgh Steelers defense that's looked great. So if you get the J.K. Dobbins game where he has 13 carries for 50 scoreless yards and you're getting 5 fantasy points in your lineup, you're no longer going to be selling high on him. You won't have that ability to. He's not coming off of 2 monster performances where you can get good assets. And you want to see the exact assets that are currently being traded right now for Dobbins? Let me show you. These were as recent as a day or 2 ago. J.K. Dobbins was traded 1-for-1. Look at all these deals for Chris Olave. People say, oh, these trades don't happen. I'm literally looking right now on Fantasy Calculator trade database. J.K. Dobbins for Chris Olave straight up. J.K. Dobbins for Chris Olave straight up. I can keep scrolling here. J.K. Dobbins for Olave. Dobbins for Olave, right? You can put in other players and see the trades that just happened. J.K. Dobbins for Brandon Ayuk. J.K. Dobbins I saw in a lot of trades as well for straight up for guys like Mike Evans, even Kyron Williams. These are all guys that I would rather have over J.K. Dobbins at this point, and those trades are happening. So if you have him, why not try and get it done? Now, the next player I want to talk about is Calvin Ridley, who is also, like J.K. Dobbins, coming off of a monster week. Now, just how good was this week for Calvin Ridley against the New York Jets, which is not an easy matchup against Sauce Gardner? Well, 4 catches for 77 yards and a touchdown. Also gets a carry on the ground, and he scores a touchdown. He puts up over 24 fantasy points. His big play came on a 60-yard reception for a touchdown, which is basically all of his production in the receiving game for the most part. So I think right now, since he found the end zone not just once but twice in the air and on the ground, I think it's the perfect time to sell Ridley. Look, through 2 weeks right now, Ridley's seeing a lot of downfield usage. We like to see that. He ranks number 1 in the NFL in air yards, and he ranks 3rd in downfield targets. Like, check this out. His average depth of target, how often, or on average, how far his targets are going downfield, number 1 in the NFL, 24.5 right now. Like, these are all the things that we want to see. It leads to explosive plays for your fantasy receivers, like he had in week 2 with Will Levis, his quarterback, where he had a 60-yard touchdown. But my issue is not these targets. My issue is the inaccuracy of these targets and how inconsistent Ridley's performances are going to be if this inaccuracy continues. Because as of right now, through 2 weeks, just 53%, oh my God, that's horribly bad. And again, it's a small sample, but 53% are catchable. That's it. That means 47% of Ridley's targets right now are not catchable from Will Levis. I mean, if this was the end of the season and you get this type of production to continue, you're probably looking at a wide receiver who's not finishing within the top 36 wide receivers, because half of his targets are literally not catchable. So that's why, in my opinion, right now could be the perfect time to be selling Calvin Ridley, because I don't know if I just trust this Titans offense or Will Levis. According to NFL Pro right now, Will Levis ranks 30th out of 32 starting quarterbacks in efficiency through 2 games. 30th out of 32. The guys below him are guys like Caleb Williams and Bryce Young, who just got sat Bryce Young. And if I pull up NFL Pro right here, Will Levis currently leads all players. So it's not all Will Levis's point. He's leading. This is sorted right now by, if I scroll over this column right here, quarterback pressures. He's being pressured 53% of the time. Look at the next closest quarterback, 44%. Nearly 10% more pressure is happening right now for Will Levis. So again, part of that is because he's holding on to the ball longer, and a lot of that has to do with the biggest concern for this team coming into the season outside of Levis, their offensive line. And look, I get it. It's a young unit on that offensive line. It's something that can come together, and I think it probably will as the season goes on, but this is still a concern. Now, the one positive for Ridley is just his competition. You have a limited DeAndre Hopkins still, 32 years old, by the way, playing with a torn MCL. That's not great. Tyler Boyd, who I actually like as a receiver, had 5 targets last week, but not going to threaten downfield. Treylon Burks, we know what he is. Nick Westbrook, I believe, is still here. We know what he is. They don't really have a threatening tight end, and Chigakonkwu hasn't really broken out since a hot start in his rookie year. So Calvin Ridley just has no target competition. He should be able to earn a 25+% target share on this team, but are half of those targets going to be inaccurate? Like, I know he's going to have more big weeks. He could have a big week this week, but how consistent will those be? If you could, I'd rather just trade him right now for guys like Jameson Williams or even Chris Olave if you can get that deal done. And again, I know what you're saying, Sal, these deals never happen. What are you talking about? Well, you see right here, Calvin Ridley and Rashid Shaheed for Jamar Chase just happened recently. I mean, you can scroll through all the deals that have been happening on this database the last few days. I saw a deal for Calvin Ridley for Chris Olave straight up. Calvin Ridley and Jerome Ford for Garrett Wilson. I'll do that instantly. I'll do that 3 times on Sunday. Give me that every single day of the week right now. These deals are happening not just once a day. They're literally happening like 50+ times a day on that database. Now, a lot of people will say, oh, I don't know who to trade my player for. Where is my value? Well, I built a tool for you. It's my trade calculator right here. It's my rest of season rankings, if you will. These tools right here, if you just scroll through it, it will show you the ranks for the rest of the season. So if you wanted to trade for, say, somebody like Rashee Rice, he's my 23rd overall player the rest of the season. So if you were trying to deal a DK Metcalf for him off of a big week, if you were trying to deal a Travis Kelce for him, that would be a great offer for you. It's as simple as that. Who's ranked higher in your trades? And you can get that tool and a whole lot more tools. My weekly rankings and projections, waiver wire tiers, matchup notes for every single fantasy relevant player. You can get those in my fantasy blueprint. Now, how can you get the blueprint? Well, you just sign up through one of my 2 partners right here. There'll be a link in the description below. And here's the thing. If you sign up through these partners, the blueprint becomes risk-free. Now, what does that mean, Sal? Well, it's a great question. It means the one-time payment of $10 when you sign up through one of our partners. If you don't make your fantasy playoffs like you see right here using this material, I'll just refund you 100% that payment. So you either make your fantasy playoffs or you don't, and you get your money back, and you got to use the tools the whole year. So if you want to join the nearly 20,000 people who currently have access to my fantasy blueprint, you can just scan this QR code on the screen right here. There might be a little card that pops up as well. There's a link in the description. Any way you want to get it, you go get it right now to smack around your competition with. Get all these tools. What are you waiting for? All right, the next guy I want to talk about is one DeAndre Swift, and you might be chuckling to yourself right now, like, DeAndre Swift, oh my God, this guy's been terrible. And trust me, listen. The whole point of this is not to trade him immediately. It's to trade him after this upcoming week, and I'll explain. Right now, DeAndre Swift ranks 39th amongst running backs. I mean, literally one of the worst running backs in the NFL right now. He currently ranks 52nd in the NFL in yards per touch, averaging just 2.6 yards per touch. Atrocious. Now, what does that break down to? It breaks down to him having 24 rush attempts for 48 yards. A couple of receptions as well added in there, so literally 2 yards per carry on the ground. It has not been good, and a lot of this has to do with DeAndre Swift not looking great, but also the interior of the Bears offensive line looks rough right now. And the overall offense looks rough. I mean, look at this tweet I put out. The Bears ranked dead last in the NFL, averaging just 2.6 yards per passing play. For context, that's 20% worse than the Bryce Young-led Panthers. So Bryce Young, who just got benched, we're talking about a historically bad offense and showing from Bryce Young. He got benched, and right now the Bears passing game is 20% worse than that. So yeah, this is all bad news for Swift. He currently has no trade value, but there is some good news. Starting with the fact that he currently has a stranglehold. Like, he is the clear-cut RB1 on this team, playing 67% of the snaps through 2 weeks, running 59% of the routes, which leads to targets, and seeing 55% of the rush attempts. I mean, look at the other guys on this team. Khalil Herbert, just 9%. Travis Homer, just 7%. If you actually took out Caleb Williams' quarterback runs in this game, or so far this season, this number would be closer to 70+% of the carries for DeAndre Swift. Now, obviously, if he continues to play really bad, those aren't going to hold up. They're going to have to give other guys like Khalil Herbert, maybe like Roschon Johnson, some touches there, but for right now, he has this role. And it's one of the best roles currently in football. He has a top 10 opportunity share. He ranks 8th in opportunity share, seeing 77% of the Bears' backfield touches right now, playing nearly 70% of the snaps is what you're getting here. here, so 14th overall. So this is something that looks really good on paper. Like, it's going to look strong. Everything feels good. This is a running that you want on your rosters, except the fact that he's been highly inefficient, but that could all change this week. This is the matchup that we needed. A 1-point spread game. The Bears have to go on the road. It should be a close game against the Colts. And have you been paying attention to how bad this Colts team is? I'm talking about on defense, but also the offense has a little bit of concerns right now. But they've allowed 150-yard rushers each of the first 2 weeks to Joe Mixon and Josh Jacobs on 30 carries each, because you can just run the ball all you want on this team. And to make matters worse, DeForest Buckner, their defensive tackle, who, oh yeah, surprise, surprise, that's going to help in the run game to have him out there. He's going to be placed on IR, miss at least 4 weeks with a back injury right now. So this defensive line that is already struggling, is already giving up a ton of yards before contact, struggling to tackle. Yeah, they just got even weaker. And now DeAndre Swift can come to town. And now it's a situation where if he sees these 14 to 18 to 20 touches in a game, maybe we can get a good week out of him. And listen to me closely. Come here. Once he has that good week, if he scores a touchdown, if he has 60 plus yards and he has a 15 plus point day, trade him. If it's in a package deal, I don't care. Get rid of this dude immediately after this week. Now, I mentioned at the top of the show that you want to be trying to sell high on players as much as you can, but I do think that in this situation, you can sell low on Jerome Ford, and it's probably not going to be a 1-for-1 deal. You're going to have to put him in some sort of package. But look, everything started great for Jerome Ford. You look at his week 1 usage, couldn't get any better. 73% of the snaps, 86% of the backfield carries, 64% of the running back routes run for the Cleveland Browns. It literally doesn't get better than this. It looks like you had a workhorse back on your team. And that usage translated to a solid game. 12 rush attempts and 6 catches. So you get 18 touches for the guy. He goes over 70 total, or about 70 total yards and a touchdown, 19 fantasy points. I had him in a couple of leagues. He was on a bench in one of those leagues, and I was like, great, now I have a starting running back for the foreseeable future until Nick Chubb is back. And he was also heading into a good matchup against the Jacksonville Jaguars team that struggled to tackle in week 1. So I was like, perfect, another 15 plus point performance. But no. Life just can't be that easy. Things just can't be that good for all of us, because week 2, worst case scenario happened. Jerome Ford goes out there and goes from playing 73% of the snaps according to Fantasy Life to 42%. Goes from seeing 86%, one of the best marks in week 1 in the NFL of the rush attempts, to 26%. Everything drops. The routes run drop. Why did this happen? Because DeAndre Foreman's role increased. He went from playing 1% of the snaps, literally 1 snap in week 1, to 38%. No rush attempts in week 1 to more than 50%. Led the backfield in carries by far with 14 in this game. Now, this was pretty surprising considering Foreman, again, played just 1 snap in week 1. But you do have to add the context in that Foreman did end up having a neck injury in training camp where he had to get carted off the field, stretched off the field. So maybe he just wasn't fully ready to go in week 1. Now, if we tried to find some sort of good news for Jerome Ford, it's that in this game, he still ended up leading the team in snaps, and he did average 9 yards per carry, like 7 carries for over 60 yards. But the problem is, if indeed DeAndre Foreman, if his role is going to continue, where even if he doesn't see like 14 of the 21 backfield carries, even if it's just split 50-50, well, the whole reason why we like Jerome Ford, we took him in like the 10th or 11th round of our fantasy drafts, is completely gone now. The whole reason why we liked him was the fact that we thought this guy, Nick Chubb, was not going to return until week 6 to week 8. And there's a decent chance that still happens. So we thought we were going to get a full-on starting running back behind a nice offensive line during that stretch. But we haven't gotten either of those things right now, because we got it a little bit in week 1 in terms of the full-on running back, but we haven't gotten the offensive line play. Because this Browns offensive line is a top 5 unit, probably in the NFL once healthy, but for the first 2 weeks, they haven't had Jack Conklin, their starting right tackle, or Jedrick Willis, their starting left tackle. They've had some other injuries along their line as well. So we haven't gotten the offensive line. And now, as soon as week 2, we just lost the workhorse running back role for Jerome Ford. It is literally worst case scenario, and I don't see how it gets any better. Again, you're not going to probably be able to trade Jerome Ford 1-for-1 right now. Like, I don't know how this guy traded Jerome Ford for Amari Cooper. I get it. Like, they're on the same team, different position. I know Amari struggled as well, but come on. Jerome Ford got traded for Rachaad White. Okay, if you can make that happen, that's what I would do, because at this point, Jerome Ford to me is like somebody that is sitting on benches heading into week 3 when you can start Amari, you could start Rachaad White. Heck, you could even start Jerry Jeudy, another one of his teammates. Like, these are the types of trades that you can be getting. You can check them out down below. You just type in like trade database calculator or trade calculator, and you can just find a bunch of these recent trades going on around the world. Now, the next man we have to talk about is Jaylen Waddle, because he is absolutely falling down my rest of season rankings for pretty obvious reasons at this point. It was made official recently that Tua, because of his concussion, is going to be placed on the IR and will miss at least 4 games. Now, he could come back sometime around week 8. I think there's a bye in there. So if he was to come back, it'd be around week 8. So you're looking at like half the season now with Skylar Thompson, or 5 or 6 weeks. And that's if he comes back. There's still a chance that Tua doesn't come back, or he takes even more time if he's experiencing post-concussion syndrome. And let me tell you, post-concussion syndrome is a bitch. It impacted me for about 15 months, had to wear headphones and glasses into every single store or public event that I went to because my brain was just absolutely mush. So now we're going to get Skylar Thompson, who he might be a Kelsey brother. Now that I'm looking at, like, is this just Travis Kelsey's like twin? What do they do here? Is this Travis Kelsey's brother? I don't know what's happening here, but Skylar Thompson is going to set in, and obviously that's going to drop down Jaylen Waddle in our overall rankings. This is a guy who, if you're going to have a backup quarterback coming in, it's just difficult for that backup quarterback to sustain not even one option like a Tyreek Hill, but multiple options. It rarely happens. Like, you can point to Joe Flacco coming in last year, but come on, Joe Flacco was a former starter in the NFL for a while, and he still barely sustained. Yes, definitely Amari Cooper, but guys like David Njoku, two weapons we're talking about in a game. We don't have that type of track record for Skylar Thompson of being an NFL quarterback who couldn't sustain one, let alone two weapons. And I expect Coach Mike McDaniel to understand this and know this, scheme up some easier plays at the line of scrimmage for guys that don't go downfield like a Jaylen Waddle, but also just to run the ball a lot more. So now if you're getting a situation where the Dolphins go from throwing 30 to 35 to sometimes 40 times per game to now throwing 20 to 25 to maybe sometimes 30 times per game, you're looking at a really bad target squeeze because you're looking at Tyreek Hill seeing 30% of the targets or so still, and now you're looking at Jaylen Waddle being left over for you're hoping for 5 to 6 targets in a game, and even that might be high. And are they even going to be accurate? Are they going to be inaccurate? Is there going to be anything to them? Will they be downfield targets? How often will they be in the red zone? Everything is looking gross. And I should also point out that I actually think that Devon Achane might be the biggest winner of this whole entire thing, because in Skylar Thompson's last 3 starts with Miami Dolphins, he loves to target the running backs. In start 1, he targeted them 32% of the time. In start 2, he targeted them 38% of the time. And in start 3, he targeted his running backs 22% of the time. And in these games, he was playing with running backs like Salvon Ahmed and Jeff Wilson. Devon Achane is a much better receiver than those guys. Literally the best receiving running back in the NFL through 2 weeks with 145 receiving yards, 14 receptions. He's also been highly efficient as well in the receiving game. We saw at the end of the game last week on Thursday Night Football against the Bills that they were just peppering this dude left and right. Skylar Thompson was once he came into the game late. So yeah, I think Tyreek Hill is going to see a 30% target share. Devon Achane is going to be highly involved, and then this makes Jaylen Waddle the odd man out. Now, obviously, you're in a situation where people know that Tua is hurt, and they probably really don't want Jaylen Waddle at this point. Waddle, for me, is currently my number 35 overall player in my trade tool, my rest of season rankings tool. So if you can get anybody at or near him or around him in a package deal, obviously at a 1-for-1 for Kenneth Walker, I do that immediately. A 1-for-1 with Travis Kelsey, another player who's been just having a rough start to the year, Sam Laporta. I do these things. Even Chris Olave, if you can still buy low on him, I do these things absolutely immediately right now. It might take a package deal, but that's what I would be using, the rest of season rankings tool. Look at some of the other trades currently going on in the world as well on some of those trade databases. Now, before we get into a player and a wide receiver that has a really big name, but it is time to sell this guy, I just want to let you know, 65% of you are still not subscribed to the channel. If you hit that subscribe button, here's the deal on this channel. If you find these videos helpful, our gentleman's agreement, we shake on it right now, is if you find them helpful, it takes 2 seconds to slide your cursor just a few moments and seconds and inches across from your screen to hit that subscribe button. It helps this channel more than you can possibly know. It helps other people see us and we get more opportunities. So I appreciate you all a ton. If you find it helpful, that's a gentleman's agreement. You got to do it. Let's do it. Now, that big name receiver I'm talking about is Terry McLaurin. Now, we mentioned this guy last week. We were hoping that he would have a big game against the New York Giants so you can sell high on him. Well, did he have that? Well, it just had to be better than his week 1 performance of just 2 catches for 17 yards, right? Barely 3 fantasy points. And drum roll, please, week 2, it was more than double that, right? I'm saying that a little bit tongue in cheek. 6 catches, 22 yards, 8 targets. The performance here, he had the volume. He actually had the receptions with 6, just not getting downfield usage because his team isn't throwing downfield. This was worst case scenario. We were hoping for the great game so we can have some trade value. We didn't get it. We have to sell low right now because this offense under Cliff Kingsbury, who claimed that he went to college for a year and he developed a whole new scheme, it's not looking like that. He's still just throwing the ball short at the line of scrimmage, behind the line of scrimmage. This offense looks atrocious and it's not helping Terry McLaurin at all because right now Jaden Daniels is currently dead last in the NFL with a deep ball throw rate of just 3.8%. That is dead last. Brutal. This is a guy who was known in college for throwing the deep ball, and we can't have that because Terry McLaurin, if he's going to earn 8 targets in a game, but they're all going to be at the line of scrimmage or only 5 yards downfield, they're pointless. They're pointless. There's no explosive plays. He's not known as this elite yards after the catch guy, especially now that he's getting a little bit older. And look, I get it. His competition, Diami Brown, Omedid Zaccheaus, Luke McCaffrey, like these dudes are not competitive at all. There's no tight end on this team that's going to steer away targets, and Zach Ertz. Pass catching running back, sure, there's a couple back there like Austin Eckler, but they're not worrying you too much. Like this should be Terry McLaurin's team to easily have 8 targets a game, but they're not valuable targets. That could change, of course, but right now with this Cliff Kingsbury's Rodgers offense. We've seen it for years in Arizona. It's not good. All that's happening is Terry McLaurin is staying on the left side of the field, barely be getting put in motion. He's only been put in the slot 12% of the time. So you're getting over 80%, over 85% of the time, Terry McLaurin just standing on the left side of the field. And when he runs a route, it's like 5 yards downfield. How is that ever going to be fantasy relevant for you unless he scores 3+ touchdowns in a game every week? That won't happen, and this offense won't even get to the red zone that often. So unfortunately, you do have to sell low on Terry McLaurin. He still does have a big name, so when you're packaging him in deals, you know, maybe you can get something there. The last guy I want to talk about is Chris Godwin, because I've had a lot of questions about the #1 overall ranked receiver right now in fantasy football. That's what he currently is, because he's put up 15 catches, 200 yards, 2 touchdowns. Literally has matched his touchdown total of 2 from last year already, and I'm getting a lot of questions. Okay, what do we do with Chris Godwin? My answer is to hold him. Do not try and sell high on this guy, in my opinion, right now, unless you can get a top-tier player. Because we were promised things all offseason from a lot of coaches. Some came true, some didn't, but the biggest one that did come true was more usage out of the slot for Chris Godwin, and it's paying off. As you can see right here, according to Dwayne McFarland, through 2 games right now, Godwin is playing 65% of his snaps from the slot, and this is more than double last year when he was only playing 32% of his snaps from the slot, and it's actually translated right now because he's turned this slot usage of 65% slot snaps into 10 catches out of the slot for 164 yards and 2 touchdowns. All of those categories lead the NFL out of the slot. And so again, you might be tempted to sell. Why not send an offer? It's not a terrible idea, but I'm not doing it unless you can get somebody like this. You can get a Chris Godwin plus a J.K. Dobbins for Jamar Chase, and you might be watching that saying, no way, I'm trading both these guys who are the number ones at their... I get it. You don't have to do it then. You don't have to do it, but I would take a Jamar Chase definitely straight up for a Chris Godwin if you can get something like that over the finish line, and you could just keep scrolling here for what some of the recent deals were. Chris Godwin for Jordan Mason, probably not doing that since McCaffrey should come back, and I say should because we don't know. Chris Godwin for James Cook and Isaiah Pacheco, Pacheco's basically done for the year, so it's Godwin for Cook. Probably not doing that at that point, so yeah, it's going to be tough to trade Godwin. I think personally he's a hold unless you can trade him 1-for-1 for like a Garrett Wilson or a Jamar Chase. So these have been the players that you should be trading away right now, but again, there's context needed there. Are they sell highs? Are you getting the right deal? Are they sell lows? Why are we doing it? But if you want to see the guys that you can maybe trade these guys for at the running back and wide receiver position, those videos are on the screen right now. YouTube thinks you'll like them. I think you'll like them, and you might be, might be your favorite video of all time. So check it out. Click one of those right there. I'll see you in the next one. And also be sure to subscribe. Gentlemen's agreement. Remember that. All right, peace out.